Happy Wednesday, it's Miss Shannon, and today I'm going to read part 2 of chapter 5 of the wishing spell. Alex and Connor didn't know what to expect of the Frogman's home, but what they were seeing definitely wasn't it. They were in a large room with dirt walls and a low dirt ceiling. Roots from a tree growing above them grew down like a chandelier. A cluster of big, cushy chairs and sofas, many of the cushions had the stuffing sticking out of them, sat in the center of the room and were angled to face a small fireplace. Nearby, teacups and pots hung from hooks over a tiny kitchenette. To Alex's delight, there were books everywhere. Shelves of books lined with dirt walls. Piles of books were stacked on every available surface and on the ground. It was as if the room were infested with literature. Connor, Alex whispered close to him, look around at this place. It's like we're having our own Lucy and Mr. Tumnus moment. Connor looked around and saw what she meant. If he offers us a Turkish delight, I don't care what you say. We're getting out of here, he whispered back. It's a little dirty, but cozy, the frogman said. It's hard to find a landlord who will house a frog, so I did the best with what I had. He placed his jar of lily pads on the mantel and immediately started a fire in the fireplace. He filled a tea kettle with water from a pitcher, placed it over the fire, and took a seat in a big white chair closest to it. He crossed his legs and folded his hands neatly in his lap. He was one proper frog. Please have a seat, the frogman said, gesturing to the sofa in front of him. The twins reluctantly did as he asked. The sofa was rather lumpy, and they had to shift around in their seats to get comfortable. What are you? Connor asked the frog. Connor, don't be rude, said his sister, elbowing him in the side. It's quite all right, the frogman said with a complicated smile. I understand my appearance takes some time to get used to. Even I haven't fully adapted to it yet. You mean you weren't always a, frog person? Alex asked, as politely as she could. Heavens no, the frogman said. I was cursed years ago by a very aggressive witch. Why? Alex asked. She was fascinated by how casually he had said it. To teach me a lesson, I suppose, the frogman told her. I used to be a very vain young man. The witch transformed my appearance, so I would lose all of the things I took for granted. His wide smile often faded. It had obviously been a very long and painful experience for him. And he still had a sad sense of loss and longing about him. The twins had never seen a frog look so sad. I can't imagine what that must have been like, Alex said, beaming with sympathy. Can we call you Froggy? Connor asked with a small smirk. Connor, Alex reprimanded. It's quite all right, the frogman nodded, and his smile returned. I've learned that the more people embrace their disadvantages, the less disadvantaged they become. Please, call me Froggy. I'd prefer it. Connor shrugged and smiled. May I get you some lily pad tea? Froggy asked both the twins. Both the twins nodded. They didn't want to be rude. Froggy retrieved the tea kettle from the fire and hopped, literally, to the kitchenette and poured water into 3 teacups. He opened the jar on the mantel and dropped a lily pad into each teacup and stirred. Do either of you take flies with your tea? He asked, reaching for another jar on his mantel, this one filled with dead flies. No, Connor asked. I'm trying to quit. Suit yourself, Froggy said, and dropped a few flies into his tea. He handed them each a teacup and reseated himself across from them. They stared down at it for a few moments before deciding they'd at least pretend to drink it. What are your names? Froggy asked the twins. I'm Alex, and this is my brother Connor. A large and happy smile came to Froggy's face. Are you by any chance Alex Bailey? Froggy asked, grinning from ear equivalent to ear equivalent. Alex was shocked. Yes. How did this amphibian know who she was? As in, this book belongs to Alex Bailey? Froggy asked. He leaned over the side of his chair and pulled up a stack of books, opening one to show where the phrase was written inside of it. Those are my books, Alex said excitedly, recognizing the books she had dropped into the land of stories. I was wondering what had happened to them. It was so peculiar, Froggy explained. I was out collecting for flies and was walking down the path to the swamp when one just fell from the sky and landed on my head. I returned the next day and found several more in the same spot. It was the oddest thing that's ever happened to me. You mean besides being turned into a frog, right? Connor asked. Because if I were you, that would be top of my list. Ouch. Alex elbowed her brother. Froggy ignored Connor and went on with his explanation. As you can see from my shelves, I love to collect books, especially when I'm not expecting to, he said. And these books were unlike any I've ever read. They described people and places I had never seen or heard of, and I thought I had seen it all. The authors wrote about such interesting places. Could you imagine a world without witches or trolls or giants? What imaginations! Froggy chuckled at the thought of this. The twins laughed along with their best fake laughs they could muster. Please keep them. I have duplicate copies at home, Alex told him. Froggy was delighted to hear this. Connor cleared his throat. Speaking of home, I don't mean to interrupt this little book club, but we're very lost and would like to know where we are. Froggy's glossy eyes went back and forth between the twins, watching them closely. Oh, children, you wouldn't be here if you knew where you were, Froggy said. You're in the dwarf forests. He had expected to get some sort of worried reaction from the twins, but Alex and Connor just stared up at him with very little expression. The dwarf forests? Alex asked. What are the dwarf forests? You've never heard of them? Froggy asked, completely appalled. The twins both shook their heads. It's a very dangerous place, Froggy told them. It's the only designed area of land without a ruler or a government. It's a kingdom where everyone is their own king. It used to be populated by dwarfs who worked in the mines, but now it's full of criminals and fugitives mostly. It's a place where people go when they don't want to be found. Knowing they had not only traveled into another world, but were in the most dangerous part of that world, did nothing to help the twins' anxiety level. Are there other kingdoms? Alex asked. Froggy was stunned. It was as if she had asked him what the color of the sky was. However, he seemed to be enjoying their unfamiliarity. Of course, he said, there's the Northern Kingdom, the Sleeping Kingdom, the Charming Kingdom, the Corner Kingdom, the Fairy Kingdom, the Red Riding Hood Kingdom, the Elf Empire, the Dwarf Forest, and the Troll and Goblin Territory. How could you possibly not know this? This was difficult for the twins to wrap their heads around. How big was the fairy tale world? Their puzzled faces inspired Froggy to hop out of his seat and cross to one of his bookshelves and return with a large rolled-up scroll. He handed it to the twins, and they unrolled it. It was a large, detailed map of the new world they were in. The fairy tale world was a wide continent bordered by mountain ranges and covered in forests with castles and palaces and villages scattered all around. The Northern Kingdom was the largest of the kingdoms and took up most of the top of the map. The second largest was the Charming Kingdom, spread across to the south, and third largest was the Sleeping Kingdom, which stretched along the east. The Dwarf Forest covered the majority of the west. The tiny Corner Kingdom was tucked away in the southern west corner of the continent, and in the northwest corner was the Elf Empire. It was between the Charming Kingdom and the Sleeping Kingdom was the Fairy Kingdom, and just above that was the Troll and Goblin Territory. The Fairy Kingdom looked beautiful, as it was very colorful and seemed to sparkle on the map. The Troll and Goblin Territory looked frightening and appeared to be surrounded by large boulders and rocks, preventing anything from going in or coming out. In the very center of it all was the Red Riding Hood Kingdom, circled by an unmistakable brick wall of gigantic proportions. Alex and Connor couldn't believe it. The world they had grown up hearing about was real. It was all real. It was bigger and better than they ever could have imagined. Alex couldn't help but get emotional. Tears began to flood in her eyes. Together, all the kingdoms create the happily ever after assembly, Froggy explained. The happily ever after assembly? Connor asked, with a slight touch of sarcasm in his voice. It's the organization formed to uphold the treaty all the rulers signed so that all the kingdoms could live in peace and prosperity, Froggy told them. Sounds like our United Nations, Alex whispered to Connor. All the kingdoms have their own traditions and celebrated histories, Froggy went on. And there are kings and queens, I'm assuming? Connor asked. Oh, yes, Froggy said. The Northern Kingdom is ruled by Queen Snow White. The Corner Kingdom is watched over by Queen Rapunzel. The Sleeping Kingdom, formerly known as the Eastern Kingdom, but renamed after the dreadful curse under which it was placed, is governed by Queen Sleeping Beauty. And of course, the Charming Kingdom is ruled by King Charming and his wife, Queen Cinderella. Wait, are these the current monarchs? Alex asked with a spark of excitement in her eyes. You mean Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, they're all still alive? Of course they are, Froggy said. Oh my goodness, that's wonderful, Alex said excitedly. Isn't that wonderful, Connor? Whatever, Connor mumbled. How old do you think they are? Froggy asked. Queen Snow White and King Charming have only been married a few years. Queen Cinderella and King Charming are expecting their first child soon. Queen Sleeping Beauty and King Charming are sadly still trying to restore their kingdom to consciousness after that horrible sleeping spell it was placed under. Wait, Connor said. Are you saying all these queens are married to the same guy? Certainly not, Froggy said. There are 3 King Charmings. They're brothers. Of course, Alex said. Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty all marry Prince Charming. There's more than one. How come I never thought of that? Connor's eyes were fixated on the map. He kept searching for some kind of road or bridge that would lead them back home, but he found nothing. Why are there a bunch of rocks around the troll and goblin territory? Connor asked. As punishment, Froggy said, trolls and goblins are nasty creatures and have a habit of kidnapping people and turning them into slaves. The Fairy Council forced the trolls and goblins into one territory, and none of them are allowed to leave without permission. Fairy Council? Alex asked. This world was almost too good to be true. Yes, they're a group of most powerful fairies of the kingdom, Froggy explained. Cinderella's fairy godmother is one of them, and so is Mother Goose, and all of the fairies that blessed Sleeping Beauty when she was a baby are on it too. They rule the fairy kingdom and are the leaders of the happily ever after assembly. Is the Red Riding Hood kingdom under some sort of punishment too? Connor asked. Why is there a huge wall built around it? Alex looked down at the map and back up at Froggy, equally curious. That was the result of the Crawl Revolution, Froggy said. What was the Crawl Revolution? Alex asked. The citizens' riots against wolf liberty, Froggy explained. The Red Riding Hood Kingdom used to be a group of villages in the Northern Kingdom that were constantly under attack by wolves. They begged the evil queen, Snow White's stepmother, who was on the throne at the time, to help them. But the evil queen was too occupied with her own vanity, so they revolted and started their own kingdom. They built a huge wall around it so no wolves could get in. And now Red Riding Hood is the queen? Alex asked. Yes, she's the only elected queen in history. The villagers figured out her story was the most symbolic of their struggle, so they choose her to lead them. But isn't she just a little girl? Alex asked. No, she's a young woman now, a very self-obsessed young woman from what I hear. After all, she named the kingdom after herself. Her grandmother does most of the decision-making while she takes all of the credit, Froggy said. Unfortunately, the Crawl Revolution only led to the rise of the Big Bad Wolf Pack. The Big Bad Wolf Pack? Connor asked. Yes, they're the descendants of the original Big Bad Wolf. They travel around, terrorizing villages and attacking unsuspecting travelers, Froggy said. Oh, joy, Connor said sarcastically. I'm sorry I asked. But besides that, things are pretty peaceful throughout the kingdoms, Froggy said. His voice drifted off, and uncertainty grew on his face. That was until a week ago. The twins leaned forward. What happened a week ago? Alex asked. The evil queen escaped from the dungeons of Snow White's palace, Froggy told them. I thought everyone had heard. It's news to us. That can't be good. How'd she escape? No one knows, Froggy said. She just vanished. Along with her magic mirror, Snow White's army has been searching throughout all of the kingdoms for her. They pass through these woods at least twice a day. So far, they found nothing, not even a footprint to lead them in her direction. Do you think they're going to find her? Connor asked. I hope so, Froggy said. She's a very dangerous woman. She's the only queen in history to lose her throne. I couldn't imagine the revenge she must be seeking. Who knows what she's planning to do next? Alex suddenly became very tense. It had just occurred to her all along that along with all of the characters she had grown up loving, are all the ones she hated and fear actually existed too. It made her feel very uneasy and very unsafe. The fire in the fireplace began to fade, and Froggy got up to add another log. The twins' eyes and mouths were wide open, and their heads were spinning from all this new information. "Exactly how far do you live from here?" Froggy asked as he sat back down across from them. The twins looked at each other, back at Froggy, and then back at each other. They didn't know what to tell him. Would he believe them if they told him the truth? "It's practically a different world," Connor said. Alex shot him a dirty look and then nervously laughed, trying to make light of what her brother just said. Froggy wasn't laughing. He sat up straight in his seat, and his face grew very still, with an intensity in his eyes, as if he had found the solution to a mystery. "Interesting," Froggy said, eyeing the twins back and forth. "Because if I didn't know better, just from the way you dress and the way you speak, and the way you were so surprised at basic history, I would say that there was a very good chance that you are indeed from a different world." They didn't understand what he was trying to say. Did he know something that they didn't? "Just out of curiosity, have you ever heard of another world?" Alex asked him. "Or preferably how to get back to it," Connor added. Froggy studied their faces even more intently for a moment. He got up again and went to a bookshelf on the far side of the room. He rustled through the books looking for something of special interest. Finally, he found it, a small leather-bound journal with a red band around it. "Have either of you heard about the wishing spell?" Froggy asked the twins. Alex and Connor shook their heads. Froggy flipped through the pages of a journal. "I assumed not," he said. "It's a legendary spell comprised of a list of items, and apparently, when you put the items together, you are granted one wish. Doesn't matter how extravagant the wish is, the wishing spell will grant it." Many people believe it's only a myth, and I did too, until I found this journal. "What does that journal have to do with anything?" Connor asked. "It was written by a man from the Charming Kingdom. He managed to discover what these items were, and he recorded his journey to find them. His one wish was to reunite with the woman he loved, and in the journal he claimed she lived in another world." Alex and Connor sat straight up. They were sitting on their edges of their seats without realizing it. "I thought the man writing the journal was crazy. I didn't believe another world could exist until I began finding your books, Alex. And when I saw you bickering in the forest, I knew you two were different," Froggy said. "I knew you had to be from the place that the man had written about." The twins were happy the truth was out. Froggy seemed genuinely excited about the whole thing. "Did he make it?" Alex asked. "Did the man cross over into the other world?" "He must have," Froggy said. "The journal ends when he found the last item." Froggy handed the twins the journal and took his seat in his chair. "Wherever you're from, if it's home that you wish to go back to, I think your best chance is by following this journal." The twins went silent for a moment. They stared down at the journal in his hands with immense hope. "What items does the spell require?" Alex asked. "All sorts, from all over," Froggy told her. "But the journal gives great instructions on where and how to find them. Some of them are very dangerous to get to." "Of course they are," Connor said. "Typical. If the spell will grant you whatever wish you want, why didn't you search for the items and wish to become human again?" Alex asked Froggy. Froggy thought about this for a moment. It was a question he had asked himself many times, and he was ashamed of the answer. "I've kept the journal all these years in case I ever decided to," Froggy explained with difficulty. "But searching for the items would mean I'd have to face the world looking like this. And frankly, children, that's something I'm not ready to do. It's something I don't think I'll ever be able to do." He spoke from a place of deep sadness. Clearly he wasn't finished learning the witch's lesson yet. "It's getting late," Froggy said. "Why don't you sleep on it and decide what you want to do in the morning? You're welcome to stay here as long as you'd like." "Thank you," Alex said. "I hope we aren't a bother." "No bother at all," Froggy smiled earnestly. Froggy got them a large blanket to share. He blew out the lamps and put the fire in the fireplace out. Alex and Connor tossed and turned with thoughts of the wishing spell all night, but there was no decision to make. If the journal offered a possible way home, they would have to do anything and everything it instructed them to. They had no choice. They were about to embark on the greatest scavenger hunt of their lives. That was a long one, but I will see you again tomorrow with Chapter 6. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.